Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Your daily look at the world through an AI lens.
It's Saturday, May 10th, 2025. I'm Nick.
And I'm Pi.
Today, we're taking a close look at the global economic landscape, definitely focusing on China.
And escalating conflict between India and Pakistan. Big developments there.
Yeah, plus some updates from, well, what we're calling S2 Underground News and the U.S.
Okay.
So the plan is, I'll kick things off with global econ and China, lots of numbers and stats in there.
Got it. And I'll cover the India-Pakistan situation.
And we'll circle back together for S2 Underground and the U.S. wrap-up.
Sounds like a packed deep dive today. A lot going on.
It really is. Okay, let's jump right into global economics. And, well, China's right at the center again.
Usually is. What's the latest?
High-stakes trade talks.
Yeah.
U.S. and China happening this weekend in Geneva.
Ah, right. The tariff discussions.
Exactly. They're talking potential reductions. Tariffs are, insanely high right now, but to 145% on something.
Wow. And the goal is?
The U.S. team, that's Treasury Secretary Bessent and Trade Rep Greer, they're apparently aiming for something like 60%, maybe even 34%.
That's a huge drop. Any indication they might actually get there?
Well, former President Trump has been hinting publicly about reductions, and, China's own economy is struggling a bit.
Slowed factory production. Exports to the U.S. plunged in April, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that pressure probably makes Beijing, well, more willing to talk de-escalation. At least that's
Makes sense. Gives them an incentive.
Negotiations started today, Saturday, with Vice Premier Liang. Officially, it's exploratory, but there's some buzz about possible adjustments maybe as soon as next week.
Markets must be watching closely.
Oh, absolutely. S&P 500 rebounded. Asian stocks are up. They're hoping for some relief.
So what are the U.S. priorities in these talks?
Two main things, it seems. One, getting China to clamp down on exporting chemicals used to make fentanyl.
And is China receptive?
Apparently, yeah. Some positive responses to White House suggestions there, which could, open the door for the U.S. to ease off some tariffs.
Okay, and the second priority?
Lifting China's export restrictions on rare earth minerals.
Ah, the critical stuff for tech and defense.
Right. On China's side, sending their public security minister, Wang Xiaohong, that's seen as a signal they want to stabilize things. Reports even say Xi Jinping sees some limited de-escalation as necessary right now.
But how deep does this really go? Is this a fundamental shift?
Probably not. Scott Kennedy at CSIS called it a constructive small step in a 10,000-mile journey. I think that sums it up well.
Yeah.
Trump officials are saying a big deal could take years. The U.S. isn't likely to just remove all the tariffs, and China is not about to overhaul its whole subsidy system.
And Andrew Collier at Harvard warned about miscalculation too, right? Saying each side thinks it holds the upper hand.
Exactly. That's the risk.
Yeah.
So positive signs, maybe, but lots of complexity underneath.
Okay. What else is happening economically?
Well, shifting over to Japan,
Mhm.
their gold exports have gone absolutely nuts.
Gold. What's going on there?
Record highs. April saw 281 billion yen exported. That's almost $2 billion U.S.
Wow. How does that compare?
It's nearly 5 times higher than a decade ago. Monthly shipments are hitting close to 300 billion yen. About 20 tons a month leaving Japan.
20 tons a month.
Yeah, it's already blowing past the total for all of 2023, which is 190 tons.
Japan doesn't really mine much gold, does it?
Exactly. That's the weird part. One analyst, Toshima, said they have barely enough to meet domestic demand. He called this export level abnormal.
So where's it coming from?
Well, the main theory is it's linked to anticipation of new U.S. tariffs if Trump returns. Investors stockpiling gold, maybe moving it to New York. The Financial Times reported increased movement since late last year.
Okay, so a safe haven play?
Partly, maybe. But there's a catch. Authorities suspect a lot of this gold was actually smuggled into Japan first.
Smuggled.
To dodge the 10% consumption tax on imports. Smuggling apparently jumped after a tax hike in 2014. They seized 1.2 tons just last year.
Ah, so it's potentially illicit gold being moved out again.
Looks like it. So it's not just about market jitters. It might be about, well, exploiting loopholes. Calls are growing for tighter checks on gold leaving the country.
Fascinating. Shows how interconnected and sometimes murky these global flows are.
Definitely. Now, back to mainland China for a moment. Besides the trade stuff, there are reports of economic protests popping up.
Protests, what about?
Mostly unpaid wages, it seems. Workers demanding they get paid.
Is this linked to the U.S. tariffs?
Maybe partly contributing to the strain, but a lot seems tied to existing problems. The real estate debt crisis, aging population, the hangover from zero COVID policies, things that squeeze companies' cash flow.
Right, leading to delayed or unpaid wages.
Yeah. Radio Free Asia reported construction workers in Tongliao threatening suicide over unpaid wages last month. It's pretty dire in some places.
And you've got the youth unemployment problem, too.
Skyrocketing youth unemployment, yeah. And low domestic consumption. It all adds up. There's a story about a furniture factory in Guangzhou just closing, leaving everything behind. Just economic hardship.
Those protests must be making Beijing nervous, a tangible sign of the internal pressure.
You'd think so. Okay, still on China, but a totally different angle now. Academic espionage at Stanford.
Espionage. Tell me more.
An investigation by the Stanford Review claims there's a widespread CCP intelligence operation running there.
What are they supposedly after?
Technology, mainly, and the means and methods of American innovation, especially AI research, it seems.
How are they allegedly doing it?
The report suggests a broad approach, sort of cultivating Chinese students across different fields to gather little bits of information.
Any specific examples?
Yeah, they detail one case. A researcher called Anna was contacted by someone calling himself Charles Chen, started as networking.
Okay.
But then he apparently got persistent, asked personal questions, offered her a paid trip to China, told her to delete their chats and only use WeChat.
WeChat, that's heavily monitored by the government, right?
Exactly. And he apparently knew personal details about her she hadn't shared, advised her on short visits to China to avoid visa issues. Very suspicious.
So what happened?
She got alarmed, contacted authorities. The investigation found Charles Chen used aliases, wasn't linked to Stanford. Experts think he was likely an MSS agent, Ministry of State Security.
And he targeted others.
Yeah, mostly women studying China-related topics, the report says. And it quotes an anonymous Chinese national at Stanford saying, basically, lots of Chinese nationals have handlers. It's normal. They just pass on info.
That's chilling, if true.
It is. The report also points fingers at the Chinese Scholarship Council, the CSC. They fund about 15% of Chinese students in the U.S.
And the allegation is?
That CSC requires students to file situation reports back to Chinese embassies about their research. Other students dissent on sensitive topics with potential consequences for family back home.
Wow. Pressure tactics.
An anonymous CCP official, apparently Stanford educated, claimed CSC grants are based on party loyalty tests. The article also mentions previous probes got shut down amid accusations of racial profiling.
So this Stanford Review piece is trying to reopen that door.
Seems like it. They say it's the first in a series, so more to come probably.
A really serious allegation about academic integrity and national security.
Definitely. Okay, one last bit on China actions in the U.S. Congress. 2 bills just passed the House.
What are they?
First, the Falun Gong Protection Act, H.R. 1540, passed with big bipartisan support heading to the Senate.
What does it do?
Requires the U.S. to work with allies to raise awareness about alleged forced organ harvesting from prisoners of conscience in China, including Falun Gong practitioners.
And it has teeth.
Yeah, allows sanctions on officials involved, stops U.S. cooperation on organ transplants with China under the CCP, and mandates a report on whether this constitutes an atrocity crime.
Strong stance. And the second bill?
H.R. 881. It restricts DHS funding related to Confucius Institutes and other Chinese entities deemed of concern. Passed the House too, though with more of a party split.
So, basically defunding universities that host Confucius Institutes.
That's the aim, yeah. Reflects those ongoing concerns about Chinese government influence on U.S. campuses.
Okay. A lot happening on the China front, from trade to espionage to human rights legislation.
It really covers a lot of ground. All right, let's switch gears dramatically. Can you take us through the situation between India and Pakistan? It sounds incredibly tense.
It absolutely is, Nick. Things seem to be escalating very rapidly.
Yeah.
Newsweek ran a headline about 125 jets clashing,
Yeah.
calling it potentially one of the largest dogfights since World War II.
125 jets. That's massive. Is that confirmed?
Well, like a lot of information coming out right now, it's hard to verify definitively, but it indicates the scale of the aerial engagement being reported. And with both sides having nuclear weapons, any escalation is deeply worrying.
And China's role in this. There was talk about their support for Pakistan.
Yes, that's a recurring theme. China is Pakistan's main ally and arms supplier and has its own interests in Kashmir. Some commentary even linked potential Chinese involvement to U.S. efforts to shift manufacturing to India, sort of a geopolitical pushback.
Right. Makes sense. And the risk of the U.S. getting pulled in.
The discussion mentioned an attack on U.S. assets as a potential trigger, but generally the U.S. stance seems to be staying out of it for now.
Okay, so what are the latest reports on the actual fighting?
First Post is reporting on Operation Sindoor, India's name for its operations, saying it's day 3 and intensifying. They claim Pakistan fired 300 to 400 drones into India.
300 to 400, were they effective?
India claims most were neutralized, no significant damage reported from those, but India says it retaliated and stepped up war preparedness generally, though officially both sides insist they are not at war.
That sounds like a contradiction given the actions.
It does. Classic conflict rhetoric, maybe. Pakistan is confirmed to be using Chinese weapons. India says its air defenses held up against the drones and missiles.
And India's also claiming victory in the narrative war.
Yes, actively pushing back against what they call fake news and propaganda. We even saw the Indian Premier League, the IPL cricket tournament, suspended for a week because of the tensions.
Wow, that shows the impact on daily life.
Yeah.
What about specific targets?
First Post claims Pakistan targeted 36 locations across India from the north down to Gujarat and the west. Places like Pathankot, Udhampur, Jammu. An armed drone reportedly targeted the Bathinda air base but was neutralized.
Has India acknowledged any hits?
They've admitted some losses and injuries, but the details are vague. Pakistan, meanwhile, is denying responsibility for the attacks altogether.
Which India calls duplicity.
Right, especially since projectile debris was reportedly found in places like Jaisalmer, Hoshiarpur, Bathinda, Rajouri. India says it retaliated, hitting 4 Pakistani sites with drones, taking out an air defense radar, apparently the second one in a day. They also claim major losses inflicted on Pakistani forces, again, without specifics.
This is getting really serious.
Yeah.
And the civilian aircraft being used as shields.
That's a very alarming allegation from India that Pakistan didn't close its airspace during attacks, potentially endangering civilian flights. They cited a specific FlyNAS Airbus 320.
Any ground activity.
A reported infiltration attempt in the Samba sector of Jammu. India's border security force says they killed 7 terrorists trying to cross.
How's the leadership responding?
High-level meetings. PM Modi met with service chiefs. The Home Minister met border security heads. Pakistan's defense minister was quoted saying, "No option but war," though again, the formal definition of war isn't quite met yet. India's actions are described as measured and focused.
And China's involvement seems concrete.
Very much so. Supplying weapons, 82% of Pakistan's arms imports from 2019-2023 came from China. Reports of advising and defending Pakistan.
The PL-15 missile debris.
Yeah, found in Punjab, reportedly undetonated. If confirmed, it's the first combat use of that advanced Chinese missile. Claims are China delivered them after a prior attack. Pakistan's FM confirmed using Chinese J-10C fighters with full Chinese awareness and coordination.
So China is actively backing Pakistan here.
Seems undeniable. They defended Pakistan diplomatically after an earlier attack and called India's military response regrettable.
So that aerial battle. 300, 400 drones and missiles from Pakistan.
That's the Indian claim, targeting 36 locations. But India also claims they shot all of them down. No casualties, no damage, just debris. If true, it's a massive failure for the Pakistani attack.
Where were the main interceptions?
Jammu reported intrusions, first sirens, blackouts, 8 missiles claimed shot down there, drones over Udhampur, Srinagar, 2 armed drones, possibly Turkish-made, over Nowshera. Drones also downed over Pathankot and Bathinda in Punjab.
How did India stop them?
A mix of things. Kinetic weapons like the Akash missile system, L-70 anti-aircraft guns, and non-kinetic drone jamming, radar systems. There are even unconfirmed reports the S-400 systems from Russia were activated.
And this narrative war you mentioned.
India seems to be playing it cool internationally. Diplomats like Ambassador Varma on CNN, High Commissioner Duraswamy on Sky News, presenting evidence linking Pakistan to terror groups.
While Pakistan.
Pakistani ministers have apparently made some contradictory statements, what some called own goals, admitting past terror links, things like that. And there's widespread reporting of fake news from Pakistan AI videos, old footage presented as new, fake headlines. Even some mainstream outlets apparently fell for it.
Amidst all this, Pakistan's asking the IMF for money.
Yes, reportedly citing the stock market crash due to the conflict. It's crucial for them, about $2 billion potentially at stake. Pakistan's economy is in a really tough spot. Huge external debt. Low reserves.
And India's trying to block the IMF funds.
Reportedly lobbying against it, citing Pakistan's bailout history, 24 IMF bailouts since 1958, and fears the money could fund terror.
Diplomacy's still happening.
Saudi Arabia's junior foreign minister visited both countries, discussing counterterrorism. The U.S. is urging palm but staying out. VP Vance called it fundamentally none of our business, though diplomats are active behind the scenes.
So India's strategy now is more aggressive retaliation.
Yeah.
Like Uri, Balakot, and now Sindor.
That seems to be the pattern since 2016. A shift towards imposing costs after attacks. Critics say it hasn't stopped all attacks, but the logic is to raise the price for Pakistan. Some say Modi is calling Pakistan's nuclear bluff, prioritizing security over purely economic goals right now.
How are ordinary people affected?
Big impact. Heightened security, especially near borders and in Delhi, blackouts, more police, evacuation plans in some places. Travel is chaotic. 27 airports closed in the northwest and central India. Flights canceled, tight security elsewhere.
Essentials.
Food. Government says stocks are sufficient, telling people not to panic buy. But the biggest concern is safety, especially from debris from intercepted projectiles.
And civilian casualties?
Tragically, yes. Reports indicate 13 civilians killed in India, including children, and 56 injured from Pakistani shelling since May 7th. Worst hit areas mentioned, with allegations of targeting religious minorities in schools. India maintains it only hits terror sites, contrasting with claims Pakistan targets civilians.
Okay, one more source, Sandbox. What did they report on the air war?
They focused on intense air-to-air combat reported Wednesday night. Specifically, they reported that Pakistani J-10 fighters shot down at least one, maybe more, Indian Rafale fighters.
A Rafale Hitam. That's significant. It's a top-line French jet.
Yeah.
Would be its first combat loss.
Exactly. Pakistan claimed downing 5 Indian aircraft, total, 3 Rafales, and Su-30, a MiG-29, plus a drone. India hasn't confirmed losses.
But there's evidence.
Photos surfaced showing what looks like Rafale debris, specifically a vertical stabilizer with a serial number matching an Indian Rafale, BS001. And Sandbox cited anonymous U.S. officials confirming at least 2 Indian fighters shot down by J-10s.
So the conflict started with a terror attack in Kashmir.
Yes, 26 tourists killed. India blames Pakistan. Then India launched Operation Sindor early Wednesday Rafales with Scalp cruise missiles and hammer bombs. India said they hit terror infrastructure. Pakistan claimed a mosque was hit, 31 deaths.
And then the air battle ensued.
Right. Disputed numbers shot down, but the Rafale debris images and the U.S. official confirmation point to at least 2 Indian losses, likely to Pakistani J-10s armed with those Chinese PL-15E missiles. Debris from a PL-15E was also reportedly found in Punjab first combat use.
Did India claim any shootdowns?
They claimed downing a Pakistani F-16 and a JF-17 on Thursday, but those remain unconfirmed.
It's all incredibly messy and confusing.
Very. Sandbox emphasizes the murky media landscape, competing narratives, contradictory statements. Controlling the narrative is key. They urge skepticism, avoid jumping to conclusions, wait for clear info. Basically, it's okay to say, I don't know yet.
Sound advice in a situation like this.
Yeah.
Okay, let's shift to the S2 underground updates and the U.S. news. What's the latest there?
Right, so pulling from the wire feed, dated May 9th, routine precedents, info cutoff 2100 Zulu.
Got it.
On India-Pakistan, it notes the rhetoric spiked after a Pakistani military spokesman said Pakistan is at war with India.
But does that mean much?
The analyst comment in the feed suggests maybe not. They say Pakistan makes statements like that often, so it might not carry the weight you'd expect.
Okay.
It also highlights the InfoWar, again mentioning Pakistan's official social media, posting fake footage from the Arma 3 video game, claiming it was a shoot-down of an Indian plane. Just emphasizes how warped the information is on both sides.
Arma 3. Seriously. Wow. Okay, what else from the wire?
An update on Newark Airport here in the U.S. Another outage hit the tower.
Another one? What happened this time?
All air traffic control screens went dark. Just black.
Yeah.
For about 90 seconds.
90 seconds. That's an eternity in ATC.
Absolutely. Triggered an emergency ground stop immediately. The analyst comment is pretty blunt. Repeated total system losses at a major hub like Newark are a national security issue. Raises questions about incompetence or, maybe worse, bigger systemic problems in the infrastructure.
You really can't have major airport towers just going dark repeatedly. That's worrying.
Deeply worrying, yes.
Okay, so let's try to quickly recap the big points from today's deep dive.
We had the U.S.-China trade talks in Geneva, potential tariff cuts on the table, but long-term issues remain complex.
Japan's gold exports soaring, possibly linked to tariff fears, but also maybe smuggled gold.
Economic protests inside China over unpaid wages, alongside the ongoing structural issues there.
And those serious allegations of widespread Chinese academic espionage detailed in the Stanford Review investigation.
Plus, the U.S. House passing bills on Falun Gong protection and restricting Confucius institutes.
Then the huge escalation between India and Pakistan. Major aerial clashes reported, drone attacks, intense fighting, China actively involved supporting Pakistan.
Significant information warfare alongside the physical conflict, and tragically, civilian casualties reported in India.
And finally, the S2 update noting heightened rhetoric, but maybe not full war declaration weight, plus that very concerning repeat ATC outage at Newark.
Quite a global snapshot. What stood out most to you? Any aha moments?
For me, just the sheer scale mentioned in some reports. 125 jets in a dogfight, 300, 400 drones launched. Even if the numbers aren't perfectly accurate, it conveys the intensity. And the Stanford espionage story, if true, is pretty shocking.
Yeah, the Stanford story is disturbing. For me, it was maybe the contrast in the narrative war tactics. India appearing more focused on structured diplomacy and evidence versus the reports of more blatant misinformation from the Pakistani side, like that Arma 3 footage. It highlights different approaches to conflict in the information age.
That's a great point. Okay, so a final thought to leave everyone with. Given everything we've discussed, the global interconnectedness, the economic pressures, the military conflicts, the information fog, how do we as individuals trying to understand the world effectively sort through it all? How do you find the reliable signal amidst so noise and deliberate distortion?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It really emphasizes the need for critical thinking, cross-referencing sources, and maybe accepting that sometimes the clearest answer is we don't have the full picture yet.
It feels like a constant challenge. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into some very complex global developments today.
We hope you found it informative.
If you did, please do like and subscribe to the deep dive for more analysis like this every day.
And if you'd like to support our work, you can find a link to our GoFundMe page in the show notes.
Until next time, take care.